Welcome to season 2 of Malevolent Autopsy. I am your host, Queen, she, her pronouns. And before we go any further than that, let me warn you, this show contains major spoilers for everything in Malevolent as of the date this episode is published. We're going to dissect the patron votes that drive the story week to week. So grab your scalpel and let's begin the autopsy. Thank you for joining me tonight, my lovely co-host, Vol Control.
Hi, I'm Vol Control. I use he, him pronouns. And tonight I am in control of Arthur's tympanic membrane.
Ooh. I'm going to start making people give me like a 2-sentence summary of what the fuck body parts do and are, because I've never heard of I don't know why, but I didn't know we had membranes.
That is the fancy word for your eardrum.
Oh, that would be considered a membrane. Yes. That's very cool. I like that.
Yeah, I wanted to control part of Arthur's ear because I guess I'm not sure if he's listening very well, but he is having a conversation. He's hearing words.
I love that. Would you like to read our chapter summary?
By a wide margin, it was decided Arthur would speak with Mother Darkness. She demands Arthur light the hand of malevolence and makes it very clear she would like nothing more than to kill those responsible for the death of her daughter. But, she reveals, her hand is stayed by one more powerful than her, the Queen of the Night, Lilith. Nevertheless, she wants payback for being pushed around and plucks a hair from Arthur's head, casting a spell to impede her. Arthur coerces Mother Darkness to tell him more about Lilith, and she explains her powers and her goal, to get the final stone and end everything. Finally, she demands her talisman back. Do we continue Arthur's brat era and keep the stone, or do we give in to her demands and return it to her?
Arthur's brat era is so good. So good. That is hysterical. I love it. Good job.
He sounded so sassy when he was like, does this look familiar or whatever?
Oh God, that unearned confidence. If there's one thing you can always count on, it's some British guy like trying to sass the people he's wronged.
Yes.
Yeah, wonderful and fantastic chapter and great chapter summary. Thank you so much. I just want to start off by saying this chapter felt like it took forever, but it was only 9 minutes and 50 seconds. But somehow every second was packed full like it was its own minute. There was so much in it, and I'm so impressed by how well you condense these chapters because there's so much to cover.
Right. Well, yeah, and these the conversation heavy chapters are the hardest to do because I don't want to omit too many details, but if I include all of the details, it would be as long as the episode itself. I would just be reciting the transcript.
Yeah. So if you could pick one part of this chapter to show somebody who's never heard of Malevolent, what part would it be?
Oh, that's an interesting question.
Like if you could only show them a small clip of this chapter.
Well, it's not representative of Malevolent exactly, but Mother Darkness's line, "The bile in the pit of my stomach roils for your flesh." I was like, yes! So good. I love that line. Beautiful
writing. Yeah, I really like how descriptive Harlan can be in these times that we found ourselves in. Everyone speaks a little more poetically, so you get to be more fancy and flourishy with all the verbs and adjectives.
Yeah, and another banger witch voice from Harlan.
Yes, I loved that. I hope that he's growing more and more confident in his great female voices because they're fantastic. I really like them.
Yeah. Oh, Mizra points out the other line that I actually did include in my little detail notes, a stained soul and a tainted god. Very good.
Yes.
Very good.
Oh, I would get that tattooed on me. That's a really good one.
What part would you show someone who's never seen Malevolent?
I know this is kind of a cop-out, but I think I would actually show them the Booth John exit, which is crazy because
Oh,
it's not part of Malevolent proper.
yeah.
But this Booth John outro, it gave me chills because it made me remember the impact of my vote. This is one of those chapters
Yeah.
where I can really point to it and go, this is where the story changed because of what we did. And
Yeah.
I don't know how yet, but I think this is going to be one of the votes that we have to link to on the wiki all the time, because I really feel like what we decide here will be blamed for many things that happen in the future. Just the way that taking the talisman, or even a vote like it become entirely your own, things like that. Like, I think this is one of those big votes where right now we're going on such limited information, but in the future it will be significant. And I feel like that is something that is so important to me in Malevolent. It makes it feel magical for me.
Yeah.
And I really like it. But if I had to pick a part that was like a voice acted part, which I think is really important, like the quality of Malevolent's acting and specifically voice acting, if I had to pick a section that was, released to the public, it would actually be the part where she threatens him, light the hand of malevolence or I kill you and everyone here. And then
Yeah.
John says, her eyes betray no lie, and she cuts him off.
Right. Yeah.
And he goes, her eyes betray no lie. She believes that she can kill. And then she just cuts him and goes, I can and will. And
Oh,
like,
yeah.
that's how you do
Yeah.
it. You don't let the hero keep talking. You just cut them the fuck off. And I really like that.
Yeah. Yeah, that is good. That is really good. Yeah, as far as like the weight of this vote, this feels like one of those votes where people who are not in the majority, I'm not going to say on the losing side, who are not in the majority, they are really like reluctant to say like, okay, like, it'll be fine no matter what gets chosen. It feels like there's that, all right, but you're going to be sorry when it turns out that I was right. And it's always interesting when votes really like have that impact on voters.
Yeah, I think that this is a good time. Usually the way the show works is that if the vote is pretty one-sided, or one of the hosts don't have like a whole lot of things to say about it, we might talk a little bit more about the episode and, the culture or some special segment. But I think there's a lot to say about this vote. So I briefly just want to go over voting culture for anybody who's new or is listening to this like as a retrospective. We've seen a huge increase in poll chat activity this vote. The last couple of votes have been really one-sided and pretty easy as far as everyone coming to a general consensus and not much activity, not much conversation, which can be great because for a lot of people, that's like the ideal scenario. Everyone agrees. We all kind of like where the story's headed and we move on. I, however, am at my peak power on chapters like these where votes are really contentious and everyone has a lot to say. So I really enjoy these high activity times. It also, to me, just feels like a deeper, grander sense of community when everybody has something to talk about in the same vein and we're all kind of working together on something. And usually in poll chat, there's a whole bunch of rules and different etiquette about like how to talk about the vote, how people are expected to behave. And I say that in a really kind way because debate can always become tricky when you're in a group of people, especially if you don't know those people very well. And in poll chat, it's all supposed to be in good fun. It's supposed to be like one big game and we're all playing it together. So everyone's in really good spirits. I have not seen anything troubling. There's
No,
usually no issue.
I've been really impressed that voting and debate is such a big part of this fandom, and everyone's so nice and respectful and polite. It's incredible, actually.
Yeah. And so there's been a lot of activity and lots of new folks, lots of new voices to join the collective. Lately, I've been trying to create kind of an informal poll that you can put in the slow poll chat, which is just poll chat, but it's for longer arguments. And there's a 10-minute slow mode where people who are on the Discord can kind of vote in the slow poll and see what the ratio is within the Discord community only, because there's only about 50 to 60 people who are actively reading poll chat at any given time. And we are at like over 380 votes. So there's a very large margin of people that you cannot reach through the Discord. And
Yeah.
therefore the comments on Patreon become really important because you try to outline your vote there. And then, there's even, I think, a larger number of people, this is just a speculation, but it's kind of what I imagine, that don't even bother to read the comments and they just vote and leave. Or they read the
and I think
first
that
few.
yeah, I think a lot of the voters vote and then never look at it again. And that is just so vastly different than the patron experience via the Discord.
Yeah, we're very we're very involved in the Discord.
Yes.
And I think it's great. I think it's only additional content and fun. I don't ever feel like my experience is in any way lessened. I think it only makes it richer, but everyone, to each their own. So with all that being said, I do want to say that everyone has been great to each other. All of the arguing is in good fun, and anything that you hear tonight, any screaming or otherwise, it's all good. We've been talking about this for days, and we're all buddies at the end of the day. I will go ahead and read out the poll stats at the top here just so that we can all be on the same page. The poll for this week was Give Mother Darkness the Talisman or Keep the Talisman, with Give Mother Darkness the Talisman at 46% and Keep the Talisman at 54%, with 383 votes total. The actual vote split for that via the Patreon vote counter extension, which I am using, says that it's 178 votes for giving the talisman and 205 votes for keeping the talisman. So right now it's a pretty close split, but we've seen it closer over the course of the week. So it's starting to get further and further apart, but it's still very close compared to all of the 80 and 90 percentages we've had in the last couple of votes.
Yeah, us veterans who have, been around for close votes before, when it's close to a tie on the first day, we're not shaking in our boots. But if by today, or even worse, tomorrow or Sunday, if it's too close, if it's 49 to 51, we're like, oh God, nobody move.
Yeah, I remember for my first couple of really close votes, I stayed up all night to make sure that we didn't tie. I mean, because it literally was a 1% difference between the two. And I was so scared that people were going to jump in and flip the vote, either maliciously or not. That never happened. I don't think we ever had to do that. But there were lists of people, kind of informal / accepted kind of emergency routine that people go through, is that if we're in that 1 or 2 percentage votes the night before the poll closes, we tend to gather up a bunch of people who are willing to be pinged or otherwise contacted to kind of do an emergency flip, where we all in mass decide to flip our vote to one choice, even if it's not what we really want, just to avoid a tie. So we get really serious about it.
We know that ties are the worst possible outcome. Harlan has said this himself. And not only that, but it sucks for him because he has to come up with a third option if we tie. And yeah, it's a bad time. So we are really careful to avoid ties at all costs. And speaking of that, I have found Harlan's silence in the Harlan and Joe poll chat kind of telling. I don't know, maybe it's nothing, but the fact that, it's a close vote and the one, Keep the Talisman is winning and he hasn't poked us.
It's so hard. How do you prove that silence means anything, right?
Right.
How do you prove a negative? And that's actually something that Give is struggling with too, the side of giving back the talisman. People are struggling to kind of prove a negative, prove an absence, prove that something in the future will or won't happen based on this decision. And to be clear, all options in every poll, if you do not know already, have been said to be fully in character. It is equally in character for Arthur to give or keep the talisman based on the fact that it is a choice. Harlan does not put choices up that are out of character for his characters, for lack of a better word. So either way, there is a way to justify this in character, which I think, first of all, is a great creative exercise. If you've never had your own character and tried to get them to make a choice that you instinctively feel like would be antithetical to them, it's a great creative writing exercise to be like, okay, how would I make them do that anyway? What circumstances need to exist for them to do that, right? So that's great. On the other hand, we also have the idea that in really close polls and really nuanced conversations about these decisions, and this goes for me as well as I think anybody who argues really passionately, it can feel like you're objectively right. But it's really important to know that all of this is hypothetical. Like, we genuinely have very little proof on most votes that anything will turn out the way we think it's going to turn out, because we're not writing it. All of this being said, my current vote is to keep the talisman, but I'm not happy about it.
Right, yeah. Well, and it was interesting looking back through Slow Poll Chat. Initially, a lot of people were on the side of give the talisman back. And it was only like 12 hours after, or a day after the poll went up, that the keep side really took off. And it was really interesting seeing people's arguments. And I mean, honestly, when I finished listening to the episode, I had no idea which way I wanted to go. And I guess, you know, part of that is that I'm always just interested to see what happens next, regardless of what side wins. Very rarely am I like super, super passionate about one side versus the other. I did come up with some thoughts after re-listening to the episode on the keep side.
Can I briefly say, and I'm going to let you finish. However, first of all, fun quick stats with Queen. I rarely re-listen to the chapter. I very often just read the transcript. This is the first chapter in a very long time that I have re-listened to multiple times over. I think this might be the only one that I listened to more than 3 times.
Yeah, me too, actually.
Yeah, this is also I think the only chapter where I found myself, I don't know, this is the first chapter where it's hit me that I really wasn't, if you've listened to the show before, you know, but if you don't, I'll let you know, I'm not really good at lore. I don't keep track of things very well. I have a genuine, honest to God, memory problem, and I find myself really struggling to keep up with names, dates, locations, things like that. So for me, trying to keep
lore keepers for.
Yes. So for me, trying to keep track of like gods and politics were really hard and Malevolent, and never really fascinated me. I don't have a hyperfixation on that kind of thing. So when Malevolent, you know, along all through seasons 1 through 4, I was kind of like, oh, okay, that's nice. That's cool. And even kind of at the beginning of 5, I was like, I can tell we're going to start getting into some stuff that I'm not going to be very good at keeping track of. And I was worried about getting bored or lost or feeling alienated by how dense things were going to get. But consistently, every chapter of Malevolent has continued to keep me hooked on what's going on, even when it was not something I used to be interested in before. It's like Harlan scooped me up in his hand with this specific chapter and was like, here, let me put you in the place where everyone else already is and give you a reason to care about it. And now it's relevant, and now you really want to know who these people are and what's going on. And I've never really had a story do that for me before in such a concise way. In like less than 10 minutes, this dude was like, Queen, I get you. I know you don't know who anybody is or what's going on, or that you don't really care, but I'm going to show you why you probably should.
You know what's crazy is this is the first time that Lilith's existence has been confirmed, which is crazy to me because I listened to the Lore Keepers and they've been theorizing about Lilith since season 4, like before. Yeah. I mean, I guess as soon as like Scratch was sort of like in the picture, people started theorizing. But yeah, it's crazy that this is the episode after all that time that finally Lilith is confirmed.
Yeah, for us in the Discord, and for those of us who might be friends with people who are very deep into Malevolent and Invictus stuff, we have been hearing about a lot of these characters that you're only just now hearing about for a very long time, from people who are great studiers and who have a fascination with Lovecraftian mythos and gods and all of that stuff. So for us, it's like, yeah, the time knife, we get it. Lilith, we know who that is. I get it.
Right.
But like for a lot of people, that's the first time that they've noticed her name. I know she's been named once offhandedly by Cain, but if you had no idea who that was before or how she was related to him, you would just think that's a random name, like, or an ex. You genuinely would have no idea. So this is the first time that a lot of people are being introduced to this character, and especially for somebody like me who was not previously engaged with Lovecraft or horror or anything to do with that.
So, why are you voting the way you're voting, Queen?
Well, first, I'm going to briefly skim the chat here, this poor neglected chat that's going crazy. We are seeing some great arguments in the chat already and some good memories about older polls, which is wonderful. I also think there's a lot of arguments and counter arguments about facets of the poll that, for lack of a better word, don't necessarily entice me to talk about them. Like, I talked about this before too. For me, the argument of because I think it would be more interesting, or because I want to hear squishy monster sounds, or because I had a friend in 3rd grade once that was named this and I think it would be the better choice because I hated that person. Like the really personal anecdotes and preferences, they're great. They're not something that you bring to a debate, because how do you argue?
I was just going to say, they're not the nature of the debate.
Right. For all of my personal thoughts and opinions, find me and at me. But as far as like why I'm voting keep the talisman, I have to say, I originally was very strongly on the side of give. I always do this thing where the chapter drops and I'm really good at making a gut instinct split decision. Like if I had to vote the minute I stopped hearing Booth John talk, I make that decision in my gut. And then I think about it, and then I go to the poll. And then I talk about it, and then I flip 8 million times in my brain.
Mm-hmm.
So yes. I originally was voting give because way back when we voted to take the talisman in the first place, that was Yorick's idea. I want to say Yorick is the one who was like, hey, or you could get this talisman that weakens this lady that is definitely down here. And Arthur chose to do that. And I was on the side of doing that because I thought it was the safer option in terms of like his long-term safety. And it turned out that it was more about like, he was kind of being greedy and seeking out that powerful artifact when he really didn't need to. And
sure,
I remember being like, oh, that's a really good point. Like, it's, we probably didn't need to go out of our way to get the loot. In fact, in my own Dungeons and Dragons campaign from a long time ago, my character was always very staunchly like, can you leave the fucking loot alone and just like follow the main plot? And the rogue would always screw things up because that's what rogues do. But
yes,
I specifically was like, no, let's go get the talisman. And I like voted for that. And I regret it a lot. Not because I think it was like a bad story decision or whatever, but because as awful as the witch is, as awful as, was, because she is dead, as awful as she was, we did not need to do that. And we did. And I feel like we are now holding on to something that is not ours and we should give it back. And I also think it served we've used it. It's not like it didn't do anything. It came in clutch. It was a good thing to have at the time. Now, would we have even needed it if we had not stolen it? I don't think so. But sure. I think it served a purpose.
I have an argument against the talisman has served its narrative purpose. Because I think that, yes, it has, but it has a new narrative purpose in this moment. Do we cave to the demands or do we stand our ground? I don't think this may weigh heavily in the future means that we're going to use the talisman again, although that's possible. But I think it means that this choice will affect how Arthur is perceived in the future by the powers that be. So I feel like that is the real impact of this choice. It's not whether or not we want to use the talisman. It's do we bend the knee or do we refuse to, do anything for these gods that want to kill us?
I think we're going to have a very long recording because I have to also say I am still not sure that I love the idea that this is considered bending the knee. I'm ready to be proven wrong. I'm sure I will be. Some part of me is like, no, I'm sure that's what it's supposed to be. I'm also the kind of player who like really prefers to get in sneakily and agree and say yes and do all of the things that the bad guy wants me to do so that I can be on the inside and strike from within rather than being like constantly loudly, boldly defiant all the time. For me as a player, I don't like making those choices because I just think that's kind of what everyone expects of a hero. It's not the choice that I would make. However, I have to say, like, that is kind of what Arthur is. He is very loudly and unapologetically defiant. He's consistently reminding us that he is kind of an asshole for better or worse. And in the cases of like standing up for what's right, well, what he thinks is right, he is okay with being like, fuck you, you know? And I think that that's a really good argument against myself. So like, you can see how I've been debating myself all week as well as everybody else. I do know that there were really good arguments for bend the knee though.
I'm scrolling through the chat, and Bird does have an argument towards give. They say, with Aaliyah with us, we do not need the talisman. Mother Darkness may have stayed her hand because of Lilith, but I really do not think we should push our luck. She threatened to kill us if we didn't light the hand. I think her listening to Lilith telling her not to kill us is really only, I'm talking to you instead of wiping the floor with your face as a favor, but don't test me. This is a tough situation, but so far this season we are beginning to see that Arthur cannot continually sass these eldritch beings and get away scot-free. We just left on this mission. It is far too early to play with this kind of fire. I hate to give it up, but I don't feel it's worth the risk to Arthur, John, and the rest of the party to risk going down now.
Yeah, and I think it just depends on the type of risk. Number one, the type of risk you're willing to take. And number two, all votes on some level can feel personal. For me, a lot of this ended up turning into what I personally feel is not morally correct, but there is an element of morals here. There is a side of people that are saying like, who cares, you know, what belongs to her and what doesn't belong to her? Look at how awful she is. Why should we be the bigger person, quote unquote? Or, you know, you don't give, for lack of a better way to say this, I don't negotiate with terrorists, right? You can only negotiate with people who are going to meet you where you're at, and this person clearly is not. You can never be, you know, if you want to keep running with allegories here, you're never going to be one of the good ones. You can't earn their respect. They're never going to respect you. And what point do you stop trying? So there's that. There's the other side, which tends to come to me sooner. I wouldn't say it is the dominant part of me, but it just is the thing that comes to me faster, which is, what can I live with? What am I okay with? Regardless of what she deserves, what she doesn't deserve, what does it say about me and how do I feel about that? So much of me is like, no matter what, I stole something. If I were Arthur, I would be like, I stole and stealing is wrong and I knew it and I shouldn't have done it. And I don't care what kind of person she is. I knew that was wrong and I broke my own code and I should give it back. Has nothing to do with her. It's all about me. However, again, I don't think that Arthur shares that value with me. And so it's really like hard to vote against something that I personally believe.
Yeah, well, I was just going to say that the way that I feel about that is, if it's a bad person, and I don't say this as someone who does this in real life, but narratively, in fiction, in Minecraft, if it's a bad person, then I don't feel as bad about doing bad things to them, like stealing their stuff.
And I think that is a beautiful facet of like a brief glimpse of how different humans are and how different this story is. Because like, I feel bad when I do something bad, no matter what, no matter who it is. I will always feel guilty about it. Who I've wronged really doesn't ever matter to me. The fact that she's a bad person and that she does bad things doesn't really impact the way I feel about having stolen.
Well, see, I think the difference for me is that I view this as a fictional thing where the rules are slightly different than how I would act in my own life. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I also play characters in fiction who are like totally different very different from me, especially,
Yeah.
my very first Dungeons and Dragons character can only be described as super morally gray, doesn't really give a shit, cares only about the people that she cares about, and like virtually nobody else. So like she's very victim blamey, for example. If you didn't want your insides ripped out, Arthur, you shouldn't have stolen. Like, that's the kind of person that she is. I would say that there's a lot of different points of view to this poll option. So kind of bringing it back to what I saw a lot of people saying. So Graham said, I just keep coming back to the question of why is she asking for this now? She was going to walk away. Why now? And I actually brought that up really early on when I was in poll chat too, which is that she was straight up going to walk away without asking for that talisman until we were like, hey, don't you want to give us some information about Lilith? Don't you want to talk to us and help us out even more than you just did without us asking you to? And she did. And like straight up, I feel very strongly she did not need to do that. And yes, it benefited her, but it also benefited us. And I feel like now it could almost be seen as, all right, I gave you a little extra, you're going to give me a little extra, pay me.
I don't believe that's true. I do not think, I just don't think that she was going to walk away without asking for the talisman. There's no indication.
There's footsteps that you could hear, and she says goodbye.
No, she doesn't.
I'll look at the transcript, hold on. So she does the whole spell, and then Arthur says, what did you do? I am done. And John says, are you helping us? And then Mother Darkness says, I help no mortal man, least of all a stained soul and a tainted god. What did you just do? I impeded her. Let that be a lesson to those who make demands. And then there's footsteps. So, like, I don't think she was going to stick around and be like, but one more thing after backing up 5 steps. I want my talisman back. So it wasn't until Arthur then says, wait, a lesson.
I'm still not convinced.
That's fair. You know what? Verbally, there was no indication she was leaving. I am only using soundscaping to infer that, and the fact that she says, I am done, and then explains, what the spell did.
Right.
He Raven says, I think there's a threshold here. If she was just an asshole, I would agree, but she's an evil murderer. She will probably hurt more people with that powerful talisman. I will also say something that I failed to consider early on in Malevolent when I was first listening was there is a level of suspension of disbelief in Malevolent that goes beyond what you're traditionally thinking of a suspension of disbelief. Because in Call of Cthulhu, this is something I had to learn. This is not something I knew before. In Call of Cthulhu, cultists are like traditionally evil. They're just like always bad people. They're not seen as the nuanced victims that they are in real life. They're just kind of like the orcs of reality for Call of Cthulhu games. Sure. They are just natural enemies of the world. And this is not something I knew going into Malevolent. So Arthur's absolute hatred of cultists like shocked me. Like I understood being like kind of like frustrated by them or whatever, but I was like, wow, dude, chill. They're just victims. Like I know they do bad things, but like they're fucked up too. And, it doesn't mean they all need to die. It just means that they need help. Yeah. After kind of understanding that nuance to the fact that like, oh, cultists aren't as nuanced in fiction as they are in reality. Okay, I kind of understand that I'm supposed to be seeing these people differently. That changed things for me. And so I think that switch just has not flipped with the antagonists of Malevolent as quickly, especially because I still really strongly remember the witch's story of how she ended up that way and how Mother Darkness saved her. Yeah. And for me, that didn't make her sympathetic. It just made her understandable. I don't forget those kinds of things. And I do really often think about how bad people become bad people, how they ended up like this. So having to kind of shift between the dial of this is a storybook villain that we're supposed to punish versus this person has nuance, and that I'm still getting used to that with Malevolent, I think, a little bit. Right. Riot says, at the witch, cool motive, still murder. I do really like that quote.
Yes.
Axolotl said, I fully believe keeping the talisman will just piss her off. We have Aaliyah. We have a method of healing outside of what Mother Darkness wants. The talisman might be more effective, but it's no longer our only way towards survival. Keeping it will only hinder us. And then in response, Autumn said, okay, so this is pretty much giving me the perfect segue for my point. Thank you very much. Sure, keeping the talisman may solidify Mother Darkness's negative opinion of Arthur, but if he gave it back, I don't think she'd even consider it as being courteous. It would just be a worm listening to her, as they always do, meaning going light on him because of his obedience wouldn't have crossed her mind. Mother Darkness isn't going to go any easier on Arthur because he obeyed her, which actually brings me to another point that I remember I had for poll chat, which is there is no way in hell that not giving her this talisman back when she has explicitly demanded it back and said it's not yours isn't going to come and bite us in the ass. That is not an argument that we shouldn't keep it. It is just a fact, in my opinion, that this choice matters in a very specific way. And I do not think we are escaping the consequences of keeping it in strict defiance of what she wants. We have no control over the way Arthur is going to choose to respond to her. We have no way to control his tone, how he delivers the line, what he says, any of that. And so Arthur could be such a huge jerk about this. He could also be really chill about this. We really don't know. And I feel as though any defiance is going to make her more upset versus giving it back isn't going to win her any brownie points with us. But I don't think it would make her more angry. And that I can't say about keeping it. And I think that is a really strong argument that people are kind of using right now for giving it back.
But I think that's exactly why we shouldn't give it back, because I think this is about obedience versus disobedience. Arthur's connection to Horg gets mentioned. Mother Darkness says the stench of Horg still lingers on you. And I think that's a reference to your weakness, and the way that you gave in so quickly is still fresh in mind. And I think that, after that interaction with Horg and everything, Arthur was really shaken about his response. And I feel like we need to carry that energy forward of standing our ground, even against, impossible power. Now, on the other hand, where does doing what you need to do to survive end, and where does weak compliance begin? And I don't know. I think, I genuinely, part of the reason that I am voting for keeping the talisman is just to not obey Mother Darkness. But do I think that won't come to bite us in the ass at some point? Yeah, it could end very badly.
At least part of my frustration when talking about this argument, and by frustration I mean like good vibes, not genuine anger or anything. I think part of the frustration is that when trying to convince people of keeping it, I've seen a lot of emotional response being so blindly rage against the machine, for lack of a better term. You know what, I should have said rage against the dying of the light. Mm-hmm. That it kind of feels like they don't care that there are going to be consequences. They won't admit that the consequences may not be worth it in the future. That doesn't necessarily mean it needs to change your vote. It just means like, yeah, I'm willing to handle the consequences. And I haven't really seen people take that approach to trying to argue for their side. And I'm bringing this up because I'm voting keep. The only reason I'm really mentioning all my points for give is because I was on that side and I think it needs to be voiced.
Right. And as far as the consequences go, I feel like the consequences are greater if we give her the talisman without putting up a fight. Because I feel like further down the road, everyone's going to think that Arthur Lester is this pushover, I guess. Also, Autumn says, agree with you totally. Following on from this, playing nice with irrational humans, let alone gods, will not benefit us and will actively put us in a worse position. We would lose the talisman and still be pursued by Mother Darkness. The last time we tried to be polite and adhere to societal conventions, we got kidnapped by Kellen and spent over a month in a coma. Harlan specifically stated he was inspired to write Kellen by how so many serial killers use the concept of adhering to societal norms to take advantage and kill people, and we do not want being polite in the face of danger to be a mistake we make for a second time.
That brings up another really good point, and thank you so much for that comment, because I was speaking about another vote from a while back, and I was really trying to figure out, like, okay, I voted in a way that didn't result in what I thought would be the outcome, or I didn't understand why I wasn't, like, my choice wasn't winning or something like that. And I was like, okay, what did I do? Let me go back and think about where I came from with that vote and why I did that. Malevolent votes are never really the same convention over and over again. You really have to pick a side to
Right.
vote from. And by that, I mean, like, sometimes it is about Invictus. Sometimes it's about never giving up. Sometimes it's about identity and being your own person. But sometimes it's literally the difference between, like, did you pay attention 20 episodes ago when we talked about ringing a doorbell versus knocking on a door? Sometimes,
Right.
sometimes there's a concrete answer. Sometimes it's nuanced. Sometimes it's from a moral perspective. Sometimes you're thinking about like old fairy tales and tropes, and you're coming up with like other arguments. So that's what makes it so complex to vote, because you can't really rely on any one thing that has worked in the past. Like with Harlan talking about societal conventions and Kellen, I love that. I think it's brilliant. I also know that you can't apply that same logic to every vote, but then sometimes you can. So that's like the fun of it, is bringing up all the different things that do apply. I really like that.
Yeah. One of the other arguments that I and some other people have made is one of the meta reasons for not giving the talisman to Mother Darkness is that, like, in the context of the story, Harlan might think it was stupid of us, the voters, to give away the talisman we chose to seek out and Arthur died for. But as a GM, I feel like he might be inclined to take away such a powerful MacGuffin from the quote-unquote players. And so I'm wondering, a lot of people are wondering, like, how is the talisman going to be nerfed? Because it is pretty crazy that we have this super powerful item.
The way that Harlan responds to votes, in terms of, like, you know, when he's talked about past votes being surprising, or, oh, I thought that would be a really easy one, or I was shocked that you guys took so long to figure that one out, kind of thing. It always shocks me how surprised he is by what we choose and how much we talk about it. I do think that we, in classic form, talk about it way too much, turn ourselves around, get twisted up, and can sometimes get really lost in the weeds of just debating it over and over and over again and never making a decision, or flipping over and over again, like me.
This is definitely one of the votes that exemplifies our penchant for trying to anticipate the consequences or the, like, boons of whatever choice. And, you know, all of a sudden we're, like, talking about what ifs and hypotheticals that are, like, so far removed from what we get in the actual canon. And it's to a point that we actually have, like, a word for it. It's called loathsome grackle territory. And it comes from this comment that Dippity made back in June of last year. I enjoy the part of poll discussion where all the normal and reasonable arguments have been long exhausted, but people still want to chat about their choices, so we extrapolate more and more silly scenarios that could happen until all of our conversations are like, we all know that if Arthur turns left, and then the loathsome grackle will pluck out his eyes, but have you considered that if we turn right, he's probably going to fall into the fiery spike trap? And I just...
Graham has been nonstop quoting that, and it's genuinely such a good post. I never tire of it. Dippity is a genius. Before we get lost in the sauce, let's really quickly make a pros and cons list together.
Let's do it.
Oh, briefly, I do want to mention that somebody said during poll chat after the chapter dropped that they might change their vote based on the wording of the poll, which is a pretty frequent thing I hear, and also does influence my vote too. But what I thought was interesting was they said if it had been phrased as something that had the word return in it versus the word give, because return does imply that it wasn't ours to begin with, and it holds a little bit more meaning for that person. I thought that was genius, and I was very interested to see that it said give. All right. I'm going to start with Birds here. Bird says pros for keep. Powerful item, will be helpful in the future. Item will be with us when we are alone. Love it.
Graham mentions a really important pro, that if we keep it, we have some sick drip. I'm not even sure the talisman's a wearable.
Look, if Yorick's wearable, the talisman's wearable.
True. Roses of Envy has a pro for keep. Arthur not letting himself get pushed around by Mother Darkness, which is that's a big pro for me.
Paulette says, pro for keep, while Aaliyah has healing, our motives don't necessarily align with hers, and so it's not like she's a replacement for the talisman. I like that one.
Yeah, and that's a good point that a lot of people have made, that we should give the talisman back because we don't need it, because we have Aaliyah to heal us. She's got her own agenda. Like, there's no promise that she's
that's a whole person.
Yeah.
Early on, people didn't really care if the party got hurt, because there was a very strong argument for yeah, Mother Darkness can't hurt us because we have Lilith immunity, but she could hurt the rest of our party. She just threatened to do
Right.
it. And people were saying, like, well, we don't really care if the party gets hurt because we're going to betray them anyway. So it's just less competition, less problems to deal with in the future. Then people were saying, well, that doesn't mean we just don't care about whether they live or die just because we have to betray them. I also want to point out, we don't know anyone's true motives. Arthur got this far lying his ass off. That means anybody
True.
can.
Jilly the Kid says pro extra life with no consequences potentially.
With no foreseeable consequences.
Yeah, right.
How I'm going to phrase that. Oh, Autumn. Yes, that's actually one that I brought up earlier, too. For the party's perspective, Arthur walked over to a woman, whipped out a freaky ass severed hand, and had his hair plucked. It'll look even more sus if he handed over something to the entity that they heard York call Mother Darkness.
Right.
So, I mean, either way, realistically, either way, it looks fucking weird. But if Arthur, it's almost like a drug deal. Like, Arthur walks
Right.
over to her and suddenly hands her something and then comes back and they're like, what the fuck happened? He's like, don't worry about it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mind your own business.
I don't think I have any more pros, but I do have a con that I wanted to make sure and mention, because I know a few people had thought of this. Con, she might take something else from us. Like, if we don't give her the talisman.
Yes, that was another one that I argued. So let's go to cons for Keep the Talisman. She could take something else, something that we don't choose. She could just push us over and take our entire bag, and then everything in the bag is gone.
Hydrus has a con for Keep. Reactionary actions could cause harm to the companions and could attract attention from other people on the road, painting a larger target on our backs. Those are good. Ink has a con for Keep. Mother Darkness might have more up her sleeve, and we're not sure of her true power. And it might bite us in the ass if Mother Darkness has other followers that could pursue us. Jilly has a con. Mother Darkness could curse us again after she plucked Arthur's hair. I don't know if she still has it, but she has a signature spell on Arthur right now.
She could theoretically remove the spell, but I don't think she would. I think she cares more about saying fuck you to Lilith than she does about kicking Arthur's ass right now.
Yeah, fair.
I think we have everything against Keep. So let's go over to pro forgive.
I did write down some popular sentiments, some popular like pros and cons for give, because I wasn't sure we were going to have a whole lot of people in the chat who were pro give. It might get us on Mother Darkness's good side. It's quote unquote the right thing to do, which reflects better on Arthur's character.
Hydra says, is an active action for Arthur to take as opposed to having Mother Darkness take it from him or have it be stolen or broken, etc.
Bird says pro give, keeps us and the party safe for now, gets Mother Darkness off our back for now, and doesn't tip off our party that we have something powerful that this powerful entity wants.
Hydra says giving it will also delay any reactionary measures on Mother Darkness's part. She might be less motivated to look for loopholes to get back at us with. Ink says we have Aaliyah and we plan on betrayal anyway. Rose, pro give, one less target on Arthur's back since it's a powerful artifact. It could be noticed by other beings as well as Mother Darkness. I love that like half of the cons end up as a pro on the other side.
Right. You can really see why the vote is so split, because there's not really an imbalance of which side has more pros or which side has more cons.
Yeah. Cons for give Mother Darkness the talisman.
I mean, there's the obvious one. If we give her the talisman back, we don't have the talisman anymore.
We down a talisman. So I'm trying to define more specifically like a con for giving away the talisman. And it would essentially just come down to the concrete idea that we miss out on any specific powers we haven't seen yet. We also have the fact that, like, she does have it. So, you know, she could use it to her advantage. I mean, when we were originally stealing the talisman, we were doing it because having it weakened the witch. Now, yes. I don't know if it does the same thing to Mother Darkness. I doubt it. I think it was specifically for the witch. And so without it, the witch was hindered, but I don't think it does that for Mother Darkness. I think it's just a thing.
Yeah, I agree. Bird has a con. The party might see us giving something to her, which could make us untrustworthy. Also, the loss of a cute accessory. Very important. Those are the consequences we need to keep our eyes on.
Mizra says, con, give. Lilith may not be happy if it looks like Arthur is giving in or listening to Mother Darkness. It makes it harder to talk to her later.
think that's a pretty solid pro and con list.
Yeah. I think we're good. I think we're good on having the list ready to go. I think that we have had such a wonderful and spirited debate. I may end up
Yes.
going with a different tactic as far as like pros and con lists for future votes, because I think they're only really useful when it comes to really concrete stuff, like the last vote that we had, which was reset the shoulder. So, I think sometimes they're not the best approach to tackling these, but I do enjoy making them with you guys. I think it's a lot of fun. I also think it's really fun to watch you guys desperately try to hold your breath and not interrupt each other's arguments with counter arguments, because that was so fun.
Yeah. I think that sometimes the pros and cons lists can end up leaning towards hypotheticals and assumptions of what could happen and not necessarily like concrete things that we're for sure about. But it's also, we don't know what consequences or actions are going to happen because of the vote.
Yeah, and I think especially with this vote in particular, truly we can make a lot of like guesses and assessments about what we've learned, and I think you could make an argument that there's many different ways to approach this. I think votes are only close when the answer is not that obvious. We're still very close. I'm going to refresh right now and do a final count before we close out the night. 383 votes. That's so many people.
383, is that what you said?
Yeah.
Wow. 383?
I am still just not sure this is the right decision. Vol, tell me this is the right choice.
This is absolutely the right choice because it's the choice that I chose, and I had actual arguments for why I chose it. I don't always have like a really strong opinion, strong enough to write out my arguments and post in poll chat before, I start getting ready for visiting on Autopsy when I get the chance.
True. That's true. Vol is also a very good writer, and when we were first realizing that Malevolent had votes, he was so consistently on the money about which way the story would go according to Harlan. I think he's got like a telepathic link.
Well, you were saying earlier how it's a really interesting writing exercise to try to figure out how to make a character do something that might not be immediately obvious for their character type. And
Yeah.
I do a lot of that. I really enjoy that. It's something that I always have fun writing. It's like, okay, I want this character to do this. How do I convince them to do it when there's all these mental obstacles or memories or history that has shaped what they like or don't like? And so it's really fun for me to try and imagine how Harlan what direction he's going to go into with each of the vote options. But honestly, he's such an impressive writer, and so it's just always a joy no matter what happens.
Yeah, I agree. I'm very excited. For the last few votes, it's been like this where I'm like, okay, yeah, the vote, but can you release a chapter now? Like, I
Right.
just want to know what's going on. I just want more story
Yeah.
right now. So I'm very excited regardless of what wins. I genuinely feel that way. I don't think either one of these choices could possibly be boring. That would be the worst case scenario,
Right.
and that's not
Yeah.
possible. So we all
No
win in
way.
the end, really.
Yeah. And you especially are winning this week because
Oh
the
my
poll
God,
chat
the
has been so
debate, the
lively.
polls, it's so good. Thank you, of course, to Harlan Guthrie, the sole creator of Malevolent. You can find everything official at linktree/Harlan Guthrie. Without his labor of love for a story he wants to tell, we wouldn't be here. And speaking of here, if you want to be part of the live vote chat I record each week, join the Invictus Patreon and connect your Discord account. We have our own private patrons-only Autopsy channel. If you want to chat with me and maybe even some other folks you hear from on the show, you can also find a public Autopsy channel in the Invictus Discord too, so you can hang out even if you're not a patron. While Malevolent Autopsy is my pride and joy, it wouldn't be ever improving without some key players. Thank you to Mizra, Nikki, and Vol Control for their work editing and assisting with production. They do so much for the show, and they do it all as volunteers, and I couldn't be more grateful. To submit a voice recording, have your message read aloud on the show, or find us on other platforms, visit linktree/Malevolent Autopsy. Thank you, of course, to Harlan Guthrie, the sole creator of Malevolent. You can find everything official at linktree/Harlan Guthrie. Without his labor of love for a story he wants to tell, we wouldn't be here. And speaking of here, if you want to be part of the live vote chat I record each week, join the Invictus Patreon and connect your Discord account. We have our own private patrons-only autopsy channel. If you want to chat with me and maybe even some other folks you hear from on the show, you can also find a public autopsy channel from the Invictus Discord so you can hang out even if you're not a patron. While Malevolent Autopsy is my pride and joy, it wouldn't be ever improving without some key players. Thank you to Mizra, Nikki, and Vol Control for their work editing and assisting with production. They do so much for the show, and they do it all as volunteers, and I couldn't be more grateful. To submit a voice recording, have your message read aloud on the show, or find us on other platforms, visit linktree/Malevolent Autopsy. Let's hear from one more Malevolent fan before we finish this week.
Hello, loves. O'Kelly signing in to talk to you about a message that I would leave for Oscar. Thank you for being the representation that you are. As a religious person that has been burned far too many times by her own people, it's hard to reconcile that with the fact that you want to stay faithful or spiritual. To have a representation of someone that is stuck in it in the face of persecution for your own religious community in order to balance out that unfortunately rampant hate and negativity that you see within that community is invaluable. To have that toxicity seen as something that you can fight against rather than something to be dropped and moved on from isn't seen as often and is something that more religious people, such as myself, desperately need to see. So thank you. It is encouraging to know that we can still be the good and light amongst it all. And I hope that you listening to this know that you too can be the light in your own communities. You aren't alone, and you are loved. Have a good day, evening, or night.
I'm your host, Queen, and I'll see you next week. The horrors persist, but so do we.